How do I pick stocks? Today I'm going to share with you guys five of the biggest things that I truly look for when I'm trying to find a stock to actually invest in. And when I'm trying to decipher if I should pick this stock, these are the five biggest things. There's so many different things I take into account, guys. Now, if you want more info on this, there's my book here. It's linked in that description that goes through my full stock market strategy on how I pick a stock. But I want to do a video that's like the best way I could in a 10 or 15 minute video, explain how exactly I pick stocks and what are the biggest factors I look for, guys. So I hope you enjoy this video today. Hit a thumbs up if you do, and let's get right into this. So first thing, and all these are equally as important. So just because I mentioned this first one doesn't mean it's more important than the last one. We're gonna go through five different ones. They're all super important. They're all super important at the end of the day. Number one is a strong brand. Now, this is especially true if it's business to consumer. So there's a few different types of businesses, right? There's business to government, so there's businesses selling to the government. So think of like, someone making military aircrafts. That's a business to government type business. Then you got business to business, which would be something like my real estate business, right? Where I'm selling my services to a realtor in hopes that they can make extra money on that or help their business out. That's business to business. And there's business to consumer, which is think of going to your local grocery store, right? And there's a ton of bags of chips there. Those chip companies are trying to sell to you, you're a consumer. So that's business to consumer. And those are really the three different types of businesses out there. So when I look for a strong brand, I'm really thinking like business to consumer. That's especially true, but even business to business, a strong brand is also very vital. Now, just because someone has a strong brand, that doesn't mean the whole company's great, right? But a strong brand can get you through a lot of stuff. It can get you through a lot of negativity and whatnot just because you have a strong brand reputation. And just being the biggest doesn't mean you have the best brand. So just because Walmart is the biggest retailer in the world, right, doesn't mean their brand is necessarily stronger than some retailer that has, a super great reputation, right, for returns or whatever, for treating customers really great. So just because Walmart's the biggest brand does not mean they're the strongest brand. So I want to make sure that's very clear. But also, the size of the brand does matter in the end of the day, because the bigger you are, generally speaking, that means you have a stronger and stronger brand. It just doesn't mean just because you're the biggest, you have the strongest. So let's look at, on all these, I want to kind of like explore like the companies I mentioned on last month's 4 stocks I'm buying, right? So GoPro, that's the first one. Strong brand, absolutely. In the camera space or action camera space, very strong brand. They're the leaders in action camera. They're the strongest brand there. And in cameras in general, they're one of the strongest brand names in there. Very strong brand name. You look at Wynn Resorts, my second position, the strongest brand name. When you're thinking about high-end casino resorts, Wynn's above everybody. They're the strongest brand name. They're not the biggest. That would be Las Vegas Sands, but they're the strongest brand name. Let's think about Google. Google, it gets no stronger than Google. The search engine, it's above everybody. So when you think you're going to search something, you're thinking Google, right? And when you think you're going to, research something or watch videos, you're going to do it on YouTube. So they own 2 of the strongest brand items, are both owned by Google, in YouTube and the Google search engine, right? And then the last one was Michael Kors. Michael Kors, a very strong brand name in the, I guess you could say, accessible luxury game, but also they just bought Jimmy Choo, who is the premier strong brand name pretty much in high heels and anything, really expensive shoes for women mostly. So very strong brand names. It's something I value extremely high, guys, especially if it's a business to consumer company. The second thing I look for is a very strong balance sheet. It's got to have a very strong balance sheet, especially if it's not a capital intensive business, meaning like Wynn Resorts, for instance, that would be an extremely capital intensive business. We're talking about a resort that's going to cost, multi-billions of dollars. So those type of companies will have a little weaker balance sheets, but I'm trying to compare them to their peers, basically. What is that one versus Las Vegas Sands versus MGM versus Caesars, and Wynn actually has a phenomenal balance sheet. But in most businesses in general, I'm going to look at it from a perspective of what do they have in cash, in long-term investments, short-term investments. I'm going to add those numbers up. Then I'm going to subtract it from basically what they have in short-term debt and long-term debt. And I'm looking for ratios above like a 2-to-1 ratio of cash and investments versus the debts. The bigger that number is, the bigger the gap is there, the more comfortable I am with my position, the better I can sleep at night, just because as a long-term investor, someone that's thinking a few years out on a position, generally speaking, I want to be able to sleep well at night. I want to know that if that company comes upon troubles, they can make it through. And usually, a lot of times, my companies don't come in trouble. But one that did is GoPro, right? GoPro absolutely ran into troubles. They had mess up after mess up after mess up. The only thing that got GoPro through the tough times, right? And into this, now they're in a growth engine and all that. They're a growth beast now. The only thing that got GoPro through, well, you can say partly a strong brand name, but mainly its capital structure, mainly that balance sheet. When I first invested in GoPro, they had a phenomenal balance sheet. And that is exactly why I do it. I would have lost everything on GoPro because they probably would have went bankrupt. They probably wouldn't have been able to take those losses they took, but they could because they had basically no debt on the balance sheet and they had ridiculous amounts of cash. And that is why I do it, guys, because you never know when your company will just have bad luck or something will happen and that company will struggle and come upon bad times, guys. At the end of the day, you never know when that can happen. And I've been investing in great balance sheet companies all my way through, and I've never really had a company struggle in a big way until GoPro. And it makes me so happy that I pay attention to balance sheet, because if I didn't, I would have been screwed, guys. I would have been absolutely done. Number three, I like companies that are founder-led or they have a CEO who has basically woken up the company. So basically, I love companies that are founder-led. So you think about GoPro, obviously led by the founder. He hasn't done the best job in the world, but he's helped, save the company, I guess you can say. I think the founders can save a company better. Wynn Resorts, they have one of the best CEOs ever, in my opinion, Steve Wynn. You look at Google, the co-founders are still very involved with Google. I mean, they have different positions. They don't call themselves a CEO and stuff, but they're still extremely involved, and they've hired a ton of brilliant people over at Google. Michael Kors, obviously still a founder-led company. So those are the type of companies I really like. Or a situation where a company was kind of a dead company, and then some new guy randomly comes in and he has proven that he could get that company into high growth mode. And I mean with that specific company, not like he had success at some other company and then he's coming in and maybe he'll have success at this one. I like somebody that's proven that they can get that company to grow in a big way. So something like a Cirrus Logic that I love, right? With Jason Rode leading that company was a dead company. It was a $5 stock. He took over that company and now it's a $50-something stock, and their revenues have gone up, hundreds of percent. Their profits have gone up thousands of percent since he took over as CEO of that company. So those are the type of companies I really like, founder-led or a CEO situation where that one has proven throughout the years that they can get massive growth in that company, and then they are almost like a founder of that company because the company was a dead company and they brought it back to life. They revived it, guys. So I definitely look for that. That's a big thing with me. Number four is I like growing revenues of over 10%. I'm a value investor, but I'm a growth value investor. I like companies that have good, really solid growth going. So at least 10% growth. And it doesn't mean every time I invest in a company it has to have that, but it's definitely something I value, and the majority of the investments I invest in have revenue growth of 10+%. We think about GoPro, absolutely. They're growing, revenues grew 34% last quarter. We think about Wynn Resorts, they're growing revenues right now by 30-40% right now. We think about Google, they're growing revenues by about 20%. Michael Kors, which was on last month's video, is the only one that's not growing revenues. Their basically revenues are going down a bit actually right now. So it doesn't mean I'll never invest in a company that's not growing over 10%, but the majority of the time, guys, I'm looking for companies that are growing revenues 10+% or expect to grow revenues 10+%. And by the way, because of the Jimmy Choo acquisition, Michael Kors will end up actually growing revenues more than 10% unless their whole rest of their business falters or something like that, guys. So that's absolutely something I definitely value. And the fifth thing I like to look for is I like to look at a company and look out and say what is their PE. If their stock price stayed the same and their earnings went up to this amount, what would their PE ratio be 2 years from now? And I really like companies that I feel will have a PE under 15, 2 years from now. And a lot of that comes down to being a businessman at the end of the day, or being a businesswoman, right? It comes down to making business decisions, calculated things, thinking, okay, where's this industry going over the next few years? The company's product pipeline or service pipeline, where's that going over the next few years? What is going on with these competitors? Are there any of these competitors going to falter? What's the competitive landscape? All this stuff has to be taken into account, and it's a business decision at the end of the day. And I know a lot of people hate that because it's not like a quantifiable thing. It's not like, oh, I look for, you know, a cash ratio and versus debt and all this, like the balance sheet. This is business decisions. This is being a businessman, businesswoman, and that's a big part of being a great investor. Warren Buffett, one of the greatest, if not the greatest investor ever, he's not the greatest investor ever. He's the greatest businessman ever. There's a difference, guys. There's a difference. That's being a businessman. He's made massive amounts of business decisions on companies that have gotten him to make great returns on his money over time and become one of the richest men ever in history, guys. So I'm looking out and let's think about those companies I'm invested in currently that were on last month's episode, right? GoPro. Absolutely, I expect them to have a PE under 15 if the stock price stayed exactly where it is right now, which is around $10. Absolutely. Their stock price will probably go up and it will probably go to a higher PE just because it's a growth company. Wynn Resorts, if the stock price stayed the same, based upon where their earnings are going, they should be well under 15 2 years from now. But of course, their stock price will probably go up. Google, same exact reason. I mean, if you look at a forward basis, Google's around a 22 or 23 right now, right? The following year, they should easily be under a 15 if their stock price stayed the same price. And then Michael Kors right now has a forward PE of like 10, so they're already under it, not even counting in when the Jimmy Choo acquisition comes in and how much that will add to earnings and all those kinds of things, guys. So those are really 5 of the biggest factors I look for when I am picking a stock, guys. Once again, check out my book. It is linked in that description. It goes through all these details more than I could do in a video because I actually had time to sit down and write a book and, you know, think about all this, and now I'm just speaking from, you know, my mind off of here, guys. So I hope this was fully easy to understand for you guys. Those are the 5 biggest factors. I look for more than that, but that's the main 5 that when I'm making an investment decision, when I'm thinking about investing in a stock, those are the 5 I'm taking into account when I'm reading those annual reports, when I'm reading those 10Ks, when I'm reading those 10Qs, when I'm going over those conference calls, when I'm listening to those investor presentations, when I'm doing all the real work. Those are the 5 biggest things that I'm thinking about as I make that investment or not make that investment, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. Leave it a thumbs up if you enjoyed today. If you just came across this channel, you may want to subscribe. We talk personal finance in the channel. We talk entrepreneurship. I'm an actual business owner. I give away so many business tips. We talk stock market investing more than anything, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today and have a great day.